The day my dad died, I thought the worst was over, until my key stopped working on the house I'd been paying for. My brother smiled like he'd rehearsed it. My mom wouldn't meet my eyes, and suddenly I was ungrateful. Then I saw a detail that made my stomach drop. My name is Daniel. I was 39 when this happened, living just outside Denver, working as an IT systems analyst for a regional healthcare network. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. I'm the kind of guy who fixes what's broken, keeps things running, doesn't make a lot of noise, and honestly prefers it that way. And for most of my adult life, that personality trait, quiet, reliable, the one who handles it, was exactly what my family relied on. At least that's what I told myself. I grew up in a small blue-collar pocket of Colorado where everyone knew everyone's truck, everyone's dog, and everyone's business. My dad, Frank, was a machinist. He was the kind of man who could rebuild an engine and still show up to your school concert with grease under his nails. My mom, Linda, was a master at making a house feel warm even when money was tight. There were 3 of us kids, my older brother Ryan, me, and my younger sister Elise. Ryan was the golden boy. That's not bitterness speaking, it's just the family ecosystem we all accepted early on. Ryan was loud, confident, good at taking up space. He could walk into a room and somehow be the center of it, without even trying. I was the opposite. I did my homework, worked part-time, saved my money, and tried not to cause problems. Elise was the peacemaker. If someone raised their voice, she'd find a way to smooth it out. She moved to Arizona years ago and built a life that was mostly separate from the daily pull of our family dynamics, which, looking back, was probably the healthiest decision anyone made. I stayed close, not because I was trapped, not because I had to, because I believed family meant you didn't keep score. When Dad's health started slipping, that belief became my entire identity. It wasn't one dramatic event. It was a slow slide. The diabetes, then the neuropathy, then the heart issues. Every couple of months there was another appointment, another prescription, another small bill that didn't feel small once it stacked on top of everything else. Dad tried to keep working until it was obvious he couldn't. Mom tried to stretch the budget the way she always had, but there's only so much stretching you can do before something tears. Ryan talked big about helping. He always did. "We're not letting them lose the house," he'd say, pounding his fist on the kitchen table like he was signing a declaration of war. But when it came time for actual money, actual decisions, actual follow-through, it was usually me. The house was the center of everything. A modest, aging ranch-style home in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was where we'd had birthdays, Thanksgiving dinners, and those evenings where you sat around the TV with a bowl of popcorn and felt like the world couldn't touch you. It was also where Dad wanted to stay, even when his body started betraying him. By the time I was in my mid-30s, it was clear the house needed work. Not cosmetic work, real work. The roof had a soft spot. The plumbing had issues that temporary fixes weren't fixing anymore. The electrical panel was outdated and, according to the inspector, a fire hazard waiting for the right bad day. Mom would wave it off. "We'll get to it," she'd say, but her eyes would flick away, and I could see the fear underneath. One night, after Dad had a scare and spent a weekend in the hospital, Mom sat at the kitchen table with a pile of paperwork and a look I'd never seen on her face before, something close to defeat. "We might have to sell," she said quietly. That sentence landed like a punch, not because the idea was impossible, but because it felt like a family line being erased. Ryan immediately turned it into a performance. "Over my dead body," he said, like we were in a movie. I didn't say much. I just stared at the paperwork and did the math in my head. I had decent credit. I had savings. I had a steady job. And I had this quiet, stubborn belief that if I didn't step in, nobody else would. So I made an offer. "I can take over the mortgage," I said, "or refinance it, whatever makes sense. But Dad shouldn't have to move right now." Mom's eyes filled up instantly, like she'd been holding her breath for months. Dad looked embarrassed, which was his default reaction to needing help. Ryan looked annoyed. Not openly. He covered it with a tight smile and a joke about me being the responsible one. But something about his tone made my stomach tighten. That was the first time it crossed my mind that helping might not be interpreted as love. It might be interpreted as leverage. Still, we moved forward. I spent weeks talking to lenders, gathering documents, signing forms. The refinance ended up being messy because of older paperwork and changes to the mortgage terms. But eventually we got a solution that kept the house in place and lowered the monthly pressure. From that moment, the money started flowing out of my account like water. I paid for the roof replacement. I paid for a new water heater after the old one finally died in the middle of winter. I paid for the electrical panel upgrade. I paid for a contractor to fix the sagging back porch steps that Dad had tripped on twice already. Some of it I did myself. I learned how to patch drywall properly, how to replace a leaky faucet, how to install new lighting fixtures. I spent weekends at that house instead of hiking with friends or taking short trips like normal 30-something adults do. I'd show up with tools, coffee, and a list, and I'd leave sore and dusty but satisfied, because every improvement felt like stability. Every check I wrote felt like a promise kept, and for a while everyone acted grateful. Mom would text me photos of Dad sitting more comfortably in the living room. She'd tell me how much it meant, how proud Dad was even if he couldn't say it. Elise called and told me I was doing the right thing. Even Ryan would occasionally slap my shoulder and say, "Good job, little brother," like he was bestowing a medal. But gratitude, I learned, has a shelf life when entitlement is living in the same house. The tone began shifting in small ways first. If I visited and mentioned an upcoming repair, Mom would sigh and say something like, "Well, it's our house, so it's just one of those things." Our house, not the house, not the family home. If I asked about paperwork, bills, insurance, property tax notices, Ryan would wave his hand. "I'm on it," he'd say. "Don't worry about it." It bothered me more than I admitted. Not because I wanted control, because I needed clarity. I wasn't pouring money into a random project. This was supposed to be a long-term plan, a safety net, something that made sense. But every time I tried to have a direct conversation, it turned into emotion. Mom would get upset. "Why are you talking like a landlord?" she'd ask, wounded. Ryan would get angry. "You think you're better than us because you have a corporate job?" He'd snap. And Dad would just go quiet, staring at his hands like he wished he could disappear. So I did what I always did. I swallowed my concerns. I told myself, "They're stressed. Dad is sick. Don't make it worse." I told myself, "You're not doing this for recognition." I told myself, "Family doesn't keep score." Then Dad passed away. It was sudden enough to shock us, but not sudden enough to be unbelievable. One week he was tired but stable. The next he was gone. The kind of loss that makes your brain feel like it's underwater. Everything muffled, everything slow, everything unreal. At the funeral, people hugged me and told me how much Dad talked about me, how he was proud of me. I stood there and nodded and tried not to fall apart in public. Ryan cried loudly. Mom leaned on him like he was a pillar. I didn't resent that. Not then. Grief makes everybody act strange. I understood that. What I didn't understand, what I couldn't understand at the time, was how quickly grief can be used as cover. Within a month, the house stopped feeling like a place we were protecting and started feeling like a prize people were quietly positioning themselves around. Ryan moved in temporarily, he said, because his lease was up and it made sense to save money. Mom said it was comforting to have him there after Dad died. I didn't like it, but I didn't fight it. I lived 40 minutes away and still had my own apartment. I told myself I was being supportive. Besides, I was still paying for things, utilities here and there, repairs, even groceries occasionally when Mom mentioned money was tight. Then one Saturday afternoon, I arrived with a box of smoke detectors and a new lock set. I'd been meaning to upgrade the locks because Mom kept misplacing keys and Dad, when he was alive, had once forgotten the door unlocked overnight. Old habits die hard. I pulled into the driveway, got out, and froze. My key didn't work. At first I thought I was just being clumsy. Wrong key. Wrong angle. I tried again. Same result. I knelt down, looked closer, and realized the lock itself was different, newer, shinier. I stood there, staring at the front door like it was a stranger. I knocked, waited, knocked again. Finally the door opened and Ryan was standing there. He wasn't surprised to see me, which meant he expected this moment. "Hey," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "The lock changed?" Ryan leaned against the doorframe in a way that made my skin crawl, like he owned the space between us. "Yeah," he said. "We had to. Mom felt unsafe. Too many people had keys." "We," I repeated. Behind him I could see Mom in the hallway. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the floor, arms folded tight across her chest, like she was bracing for impact. "I pay for this house," I said, the words coming out slower than I felt them. Why wasn't I told? Ryan's expression hardened, and I saw something in his eyes that wasn't grief anymore. It was certainty. "This isn't your house, Dan," he said. "You helped out. We appreciate it. But don't come in here acting like you own the place." I laughed once, short and disbelieving, because my brain couldn't process how casually he said that. What are you talking about? I asked. The mortgage is in my name. The repairs were in my name. I have the receipts. Mom finally looked up and her eyes were wet, but her voice was sharp. Don't do this, she said. Not today. Not today, I echoed. When exactly am I allowed to talk about the fact I'm locked out of a house I've been paying for? Ryan stepped forward, lowering his voice like he was trying to sound reasonable. That was always his favorite tactic. Make me look like the irrational one. You're upsetting Mom, he said. And you're being ungrateful. That word hit harder than I expected. Ungrateful. Like I was the one taking. Like I was the one using them. I looked from Ryan to Mom, waiting for her to say something that made sense. Waiting for her to correct him. Instead, she wiped her face and said, We've been through enough. We don't need you coming here threatening us over money. Threatening? I had driven over with smoke detectors. I stood on the porch with a cardboard box in my arms and felt something in me crack. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, sickening shift, like a floorboard giving way under your foot. I'm not threatening anyone, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I'm trying to understand what's going on. Ryan's jaw tightened. What's going on, he said, is you need to stop holding this over Mom's head. You did what you did because you wanted to. But that doesn't mean you get to control everything now. I could feel my heart beating in my throat. I wanted to shout. I wanted to push past him and sit at the kitchen table and pull every document I'd ever signed out of my bag and lay them down one by one. But Dad's face flashed in my mind. His quiet embarrassment when I helped. His pride. His stubbornness. And I heard my own internal script, the one I'd lived by for years. Don't escalate. Don't make a scene. Don't make it worse. So I took a breath and said something I regret to this day. Okay, I said, fine. I'll leave. But we need to talk soon. Ryan nodded like he'd won. Like this was settled. Mom didn't say goodbye. She just turned and walked away down the hallway. I went back to my car with the box still in my arms, set it in the passenger seat, and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, staring at the front door like it might open again, and someone might come running out and say, Wait, this is crazy, of course you have a key. Nobody did. As I drove home, my phone buzzed. A text from Elise. Ryan had already called her. It said, Mom says you showed up yelling about the house. Please tell me that's not true. My grip tightened on the wheel. My mouth went dry. I realized then that being locked out wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how fast they'd rewritten the story, how quickly I'd been cast as the villain in my own life. And as I sat in my apartment that night, staring at the folder where I kept years of receipts, invoices, and bank statements, one thought kept coming back, sharp and relentless. If they were this comfortable locking me out, what paperwork were they comfortable changing? I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying the scene on the porch like it was security footage I could rewind and analyze for a hidden clue. Ryan's tone. Mom's refusal to meet my eyes. The way he said, This isn't your house. Like it wasn't even an argument, like it was a fact he'd rehearsed. By Sunday morning, I did what I always do when my life feels out of control. I opened a spreadsheet. I pulled up my bank statements, sorted every payment I'd made that was connected to the house, and started logging it all. Roof, electrical, plumbing, mortgage transfers, materials from Home Depot, even the small stuff like smoke detectors and air filters. The numbers weren't vague. They were brutal, tens of thousands over the years. And that wasn't even counting my time. Around noon, my phone rang. Elise. I hesitated before answering, because I knew what was coming. Not comfort, not I believe you. More like a polite interrogation. Hey, she said carefully. Talk to me. What happened yesterday? I stayed quiet for a beat, forcing myself not to sound defensive, because in our family, the first person who raised their voice automatically became the problem. I showed up with smoke detectors, I said. I tried to use my key. The locks were changed. Ryan told me it's not my house. Elise exhaled slowly. Mom said you were yelling. I wasn't, I said, and I could hear how cold my voice sounded. And it's interesting that she'd go with yelling when the actual story is we locked him out. Elise didn't answer right away. I pictured her sitting at her kitchen table in Arizona, trying to keep her own life separate from our mess, and resenting me for dragging it back into her orbit. Okay, she said finally. If you weren't yelling, then why would they do that? There it was, the question that always protected them. Not why did they lock you out, but what did you do to make them lock you out? I don't know, I said, but I'm going to find out. And Elise, I need you to listen to me. This isn't just about feelings. There are legal documents involved. She went quiet again, and I could almost feel her pulling back, like legal talk was a contagious disease. Just, don't blow up the family, she said. I stared at the wall, my jaw clenched. I'm not the one who changed the locks, I said. I'm not the one rewriting history. I'm trying to keep this from getting uglier than it already is. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time with my laptop open and my spreadsheet half finished. I kept thinking about one simple question I hadn't asked myself yet, because I didn't want to. What if they weren't just trying to push me away? What if they were trying to erase me? Monday morning, I called the mortgage servicer. I had my account number, my security questions, everything. I expected some confusion, maybe a note about authorized users, maybe a change of address issue. Instead, the woman on the phone confirmed something that made my stomach tighten. The loan is active, she said. Payments are current. In my name, I clarified. Yes, she said. You are the borrower. Has there been any request to transfer the loan? I asked. A pause. Keyboard clicks. No, she said. No transfer requests. That should have calmed me down. It didn't. Because if the mortgage was still in my name, then Ryan's confidence made even less sense. You don't lock someone out of a house they're financially responsible for unless you believe you have something stronger than their payments, or unless you believe they won't fight back. After I hung up, I went down another list, homeowners insurance. The insurance agent verified the policy was active, but when I asked who was listed as the insured parties, she hesitated. It looks like the named insured is Linda Brooks, she said. My mom, I said. Yes, she said. And one moment also Ryan Brooks. My throat went tight. Since when? Since a policy update about 6 months ago, she said. 6 months. 6 months ago I was still writing checks for repairs and sitting at my mom's kitchen table drinking coffee like a dutiful son. 6 months ago they were already changing things behind my back. And me? I asked. Am I listed anywhere? You're listed as the mortgagee contact, she said carefully, like she was stepping around a landmine, but not as a named insured. I thanked her and ended the call, then sat staring at my phone until the screen went dark. This wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. I tried calling Mom next. Straight to voicemail. I texted Ryan. We need to meet and talk. In person, today. He responded 20 minutes later. Nothing to talk about. Stop stressing Mom out. It was unbelievable how quickly the family language shifted once I stopped being useful. If I asked questions, I was stressing Mom out. If I wanted clarity, I was threatening. If I wanted access to something I paid for, I was ungrateful. That evening, I drove to the house anyway. Not to force my way in, just to see if Mom would open the door when Ryan wasn't controlling the conversation. I parked across the street like a stranger. The porch light was on. I could see movement through the curtains. I walked up, knocked once, then twice. After a full minute, the door opened a crack, chain still latched. Mom's face appeared in the gap. Her eyes darted past me like she was checking if I'd brought an audience. Daniel, she said, and the way she said my name made it sound like a complaint. Mom, I said softly, can we talk? Just you and me. Her expression tightened. Ryan said you're trying to take the house. I blinked, stunned. Take the house. I've been paying for it. That was your choice, she snapped, then immediately looked guilty, like the anger surprised even her. My choice, I repeated. When Dad was sick and you said you might have to sell, when you cried at the table, that was my choice. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time I didn't read them as helplessness. They felt like a tactic, whether she meant them that way or not. We're grieving, she whispered. We need peace. And I need the truth, I said. Mom, why is Ryan on the insurance policy? Why was it changed 6 months ago? She flinched. A small, involuntary reaction. The kind you can't fake. I don't know, she said quickly. Ryan handles those things. Then ask him, I said. Because I'm still paying the mortgage, and I'm not going to keep paying for a house I can't even enter. Her mouth opened, then closed again, like she didn't know which script to use. You wouldn't do that, she said. You wouldn't punish me. And there it was. The trap. If I protected myself, I'd be the villain. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. She stared at me through the cracked door, then said something that chilled me. Ryan said you signed something, she whispered. A while ago. He said you signed the house back to us because you felt guilty. My brain went so still it was like someone hit a mute button. What? I said. Mom's voice trembled. He said you didn't want your father to feel like he owed you, so I didn't understand it, but he said it was taken care of. I felt my pulse in my ears. I never signed anything, I said, each word heavy. Never. Not once. Mom's eyes flickered, like the story she'd been clinging to just developed a crack. Yes, you did, she insisted, but it sounded weaker now, less sure. Ryan said. I don't care what Ryan said, I cut in, still keeping my voice low because the neighbors had porch lights on, and I refused to give my family the satisfaction of calling me unstable. I didn't sign anything. If there's a document with my signature, then someone is lying. Mom's breathing turned shallow. The chain on the door rattled slightly as her hand tightened. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't. And then she closed the door. Not slammed, not dramatic, just closed. I stood there on the porch for a second, staring at the new lock, the fresh brass, the finality of it. Then I walked back to my car and sat with my forehead resting against the steering wheel. Signed something. Signed the house back. It was so absurd my first instinct was to laugh. But the flinch on Mom's face when I mentioned the insurance update told me something important. She might not know every detail, but she knows enough to be scared. The next day, I took a long lunch break and drove to the county recorder's office. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for yet. I just knew I needed facts that didn't come from my family's mouths. Facts that didn't bend depending on who was crying. Inside, the building smelled like old paper and floor cleaner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. People stood in line holding folders, looking bored and irritated. When it was my turn, I stepped up to the counter and told the clerk I wanted to look up property records for my parents' address. She pointed me to a public computer terminal and told me what database to use. I sat down, typed in the address, and watched the screen populate with a list of recorded documents, deeds, liens, releases, mortgage assignments. It was like looking at a medical chart for a house. I clicked through, scrolling, reading dates. Most of it matched what I expected. Then I saw it, a recorded quitclaim deed, dated 8 months ago. Grantor, Daniel Carter. Grantee, Linda Brooks and Ryan Brooks. I stared at the screen so hard my eyes started to water. The room around me felt far away, like I was underwater again. 8 months ago. Not 6. 8. Before the insurance update. Before the locks. Before Dad even died. My hand moved on its own, clicking the document image, and there it was, a scanned deed with a signature on it that was supposed to be mine. At first glance it looked close. Same general slant, same looping D. But the more I looked, the more it felt like an imitation drawn by someone who'd watched me sign my name on a check 100 times. The C in Carter was wrong. The pressure points were wrong. The line hesitations were wrong. The date line made my stomach drop too, because the date it claimed I signed it. I knew exactly where I was that day. I was in Chicago for a work training. I had the flight receipt. I had the hotel booking. I had a photo of my stupid badge from the conference because my coworkers teased me about it. I sat back in the chair, cold all over. I'd come to the recorder's office expecting to find confusion. I found a weapon. I printed the document at the kiosk, paid the small fee with shaking hands, and folded the pages into my bag like they were evidence from a crime scene because that's what they were. In my car, I stared at the paperwork for a long time, then opened my phone and searched for something I'd never thought I'd need in my own family. Real estate attorney near me. But before I hit call, my mind snagged on one more detail on the deed image, something I hadn't processed yet because the shock was too loud. The notary block. I leaned closer, rereading it, and my throat tightened again. The notary's name was familiar, not because I knew her personally, but because I'd seen that name before on paperwork Ryan had handled when Dad was still alive. I sat there gripping the pages, realizing the story wasn't just that my family had locked me out. The story was that someone had been planning this for almost a year, and I was finally looking at the first piece of proof. I didn't call the first attorney that popped up on Google. I called 3. The first one sounded bored. The second I said the words family dispute. The second one wanted a massive retainer before he'd even look at the document. The third one, an older woman named Marissa Klein, asked me 2 questions that told me she actually understood what I was saying. Is there a recorded deed that removes you from title? She asked. Yes, I said. A quitclaim deed. And are you certain you didn't sign it? She asked. I'm certain, I said. I can prove I wasn't even in the state that day. Bring me a certified copy, she said. Not a printout, certified from the recorder. And bring any paperwork from the refinance where you were added to title. That last part made my chest tighten. Added to title. Because that was the other thing Ryan's little speech on the porch was trying to erase. I wasn't just paying a mortgage out of kindness. Years back, when we refinanced to keep the house, the lender's requirements forced a real conversation about ownership. There had been a deed prepared. Dad was still alive then, still sharp enough to say, "If Danny's taking the risk, Danny's name goes on it." I remember his voice, stubborn and proud. I remember Mom crying and saying she felt like a failure. I remember signing papers at a little office with cheap coffee and a printer that kept jamming. I had been added to title, not as some greedy land grab, as protection. And now, 8 months ago, someone had surgically cut me out. The next morning, I went back to the recorder's office and requested certified copies of everything relevant. The deed that added me, the quitclaim that removed me, and the recording information sheets. I paid for them like I was buying evidence in my own case. Then I took the afternoon off work and drove to Marissa's office. She was in a plain brick building with a small sign and a waiting room that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. No flashy reception desk, no marble floors, just file cabinets, a coffee machine, and the kind of quiet that comes from people dealing with real problems. Marissa came out to greet me herself. Mid-60s, gray hair pulled back, glasses on a chain, and a posture that made you sit up straighter without knowing why. She took me into her office, closed the door, and said, "Start from the beginning, but keep it factual." So I did. I told her about Dad's illness, the refinance, the repairs, the lock change, the accusations, Mom's comment about me signing it back. I laid out my spreadsheet. I handed her the certified documents with both hands like they were fragile. Marissa didn't react emotionally. She didn't gasp or shake her head or tell me how horrible it was. She just read. For a long time. She studied the deed that added me to title first, then the quitclaim deed. She compared the signatures without a word. Then she looked at the notary block. A small frown formed between her eyebrows. "What?" I asked. She tapped the paper lightly. "This acknowledgement is oddly formatted. Not impossible, but odd." My skin prickled. Odd how? Marissa slid the document toward me and pointed. The venue line. The commission expiration. And this stamp, if the scan is accurate, doesn't match the standard imprint I typically see from notaries in this county. Again, none of this is conclusive, but it raises questions. "About forgery," I said. "About fraud," she corrected calmly. "Forgery is one method." She leaned back and looked at me like she was weighing something. "Daniel," she said, "what you have here is serious. If you didn't sign this and it was recorded, then someone committed a crime, and the county recorder will not catch that. They record what they're given. They don't authenticate signatures." I swallowed. My mouth felt dry. "So what do I do?" Marissa folded her hands. 2 tracks. Civil and criminal. Civil is about clearing title and getting a court order. Criminal is about holding whoever did it accountable. But be prepared. Law enforcement sometimes moves slowly on deed forgery unless the evidence is very clean. "It's clean," I said. "I was in Chicago." "Good," she said. "We'll use that. But first we need to understand the chain of title fully. A certified copy shows what was recorded. It doesn't show everything about how it was processed or whether there are other documents hiding in the timeline." She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her and started writing. "Step 1, she said. "We order a title search, full history, not just the last few years. I want a title company to run it. We want to see every transfer, every lien, every mortgage assignment, every correction deed, every odd filing. Fraud rarely comes alone." I felt a chill at that. "You think there's more?" "I think it's wise to assume there could be," she said. "Step 2, we get your proof of travel and your work records, flight receipts, hotel, conference registration, any emails showing you were physically elsewhere. Step 3, we request the notary's journal entry for the notarization. In Colorado, notaries are required to keep records of notarizations. If she did it properly, there will be an entry showing your ID, your signature in the journal, the date, the type of notarization. And if she didn't do it properly?" I asked. Marissa's gaze didn't waver. "Then that's a problem for her." I sat there, listening, while she mapped my life into steps and documents. Part of me felt relief, like finally someone was speaking a language I could trust. Another part of me felt sick, because every step made it more real. At the end of the meeting, Marissa gave me numbers, retainer, filing estimates, costs for title work, and none of it was small. But it wasn't the money that made my stomach twist. It was the fact that I was about to sue my own family to prove I wasn't lying. As I stood to leave, Marissa said, "One more thing." I paused. "Do not confront them with this yet," she said. "Not with accusations, not with threats, not with 'I have proof.' People who forge deeds don't suddenly become honest when cornered. They get desperate. If there are other documents we haven't found, we don't want them disappearing from wherever they are." I nodded slowly. "So I play normal. You play quiet," she said. "And you let the paper speak." 2 days later, I got an email from the title company Marissa used. They needed authorization forms and the property address. I signed, scanned, sent everything back. Then I started gathering my travel proof like my life depended on it. I pulled up my work calendar from 8 months ago. I found the Chicago training week. I downloaded the conference registration confirmation. I dug through my photos until I found the selfie my coworker forced me to take under the giant conference banner. I printed my plane tickets, my hotel invoice, my Uber receipts. I even requested a letter from my employer verifying I attended the training in person. I was building a wall out of receipts. While I did that, Ryan stayed quiet. No more texts, no calls. It was like the lockout had been enough to reset the family dynamic back to what he wanted. Me on the outside, them on the inside, and Mom positioned as the fragile justification for everything. Then Elise texted again. "Mom says you're refusing to help with bills now. Please don't punish her." My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. I stared at the message for a full minute, then typed and deleted. Typed and deleted. Finally I wrote, "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm sorting out legal ownership issues. I'll explain when I can." She didn't reply. That silence felt heavier than an argument. It told me the story Ryan was telling was working. The next week, Marissa called me. "I have the title search results," she said. I was at my desk at work, staring at a server status report, and suddenly the numbers on my screen meant nothing. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice low. "What did you find?" "Come to my office," she said. "This is better in person." That was the first real spike of fear I couldn't control. When I got there, she had a thick packet on her desk with color tabs. She flipped it open and slid the first page toward me. "This is the chain of title summary," she said. "Here's the original deed when your parents purchased the home. Here's the refinance deed when you were added. And here is the quitclaim deed removing you." I stared at the clean, typed timeline. It made the betrayal feel organized, bureaucratic, like it belonged in a folder. Marissa tapped the quitclaim deed entry. "Now look at the recording details." I leaned in. "There's a recording number, a date, and a timestamp," she said. "And there's also something else." She turned the page and showed me the next document. An affidavit filed 2 days after the quitclaim deed. I frowned. "What is this?" Marissa's tone stayed steady, but her eyes sharpened. "It's a supporting affidavit claiming you signed voluntarily, that you understood the transfer, and that you received consideration." "Consideration," I repeated, my stomach sinking. "Like money?" "Yes," she said. "It doesn't say how much, just that it was valuable consideration. That's legal language used to make a transfer look legitimate." I felt dizzy. "I never got anything." "I know," she said. "But whoever prepared this was trying to create a paper trail that would survive a casual challenge." She flipped again. "And here," she said, "is the part that concerns me the most." She pointed to a small section near the bottom of the affidavit where 2 names were listed as witnesses. I read them twice, then looked up, confused. "I don't recognize these people." "Exactly," Marissa said. "Witnesses can be anyone, but in a normal family transaction you'd see familiar names. Also, the addresses listed for these witnesses. One appears to be an apartment complex that doesn't exist anymore under that name, and the other is incomplete, missing a unit number." A cold anger started pushing up through my chest like rising water. "So they invented witnesses," I said. "I can't say that yet," she said, firm. "But it is inconsistent, and inconsistencies matter." She turned the packet to another tab. "The notary," she said, "is commissioned in the state. That's real. But the title report also includes something from the notary registry. There was a complaint filed against her last year. Not by you, by someone else." My mouth went dry. "For what?" Marissa didn't look away. "Improper notarization. Allegedly notarizing documents without the signer present." The room felt smaller. I stared at the packet, at the neat tabs, at the timelines and stamps. My family hadn't just lied. They had used a professional weak point to make it official. Marissa slid another page toward me. "And there's something else. The legal description on the quitclaim deed has a formatting error. It's subtle, but it's not consistent with how this county typically records it. That suggests the document may not have been prepared by a standard real estate attorney or title company. It may have been prepared by someone using a template. Ryan, I said, my voice rough. Marissa didn't confirm it. She didn't need to. She put her pen down and looked at me. I want you to understand what this means, she said. If the deed is forged, we can file a quiet title action to restore your interest. We can also seek injunctive relief to prevent further transfers or encumbrances, but you have to be ready for the blowback. I've already got blowback, I said bitterly. My own sister thinks I'm yelling at Mom. Marissa nodded once. Then you also need to protect yourself financially. If the mortgage is in your name but the title is not, you are carrying risk without control. You may need to consider escrow, or at minimum, stop paying voluntarily until the court addresses it. I swallowed hard. If I stop paying, they'll tell everyone I abandoned Mom. They're already telling people whatever serves them. Marissa said. Truth doesn't get easier because you try to make it comfortable. That landed somewhere deep. Because my whole life I had tried to make truth comfortable for everyone else. It had cost me everything. Marissa handed me a folder. I want you to take this home and read it. Tonight. Then tomorrow we will decide. Do we file immediately, or do we first send a demand letter and see if they back down? I stared at the folder like it weighed 50 pounds. What would you do? I asked. Marissa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, people who are innocent don't change locks and tell stories about signatures. They bring the documents into the light. They sit at a table and explain. Your family hid, Daniel. I nodded slowly. My throat burned. As I left her office, I sat in my car and opened the folder on the passenger seat. The pages smelled like toner and paper. Cold, official. Then suddenly I understood why Ryan had looked so confident on that porch. He wasn't relying on emotion. He was relying on the idea that I would never dare to challenge a recorded document. He was relying on the idea that I'd rather be called ungrateful than call the police. I started the engine and stared at the road ahead, hands tight on the wheel, because the next step wasn't another conversation. It was a decision. And once I made it, the family I'd been protecting for years was going to turn on me with everything they had. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the folder open and my laptop beside it, and I did something I hadn't done in years. I let myself feel angry. Not the dramatic, shouting kind of anger Ryan loved to accuse me of. The quiet kind that makes your hands steady and your decisions sharp. I read every page in the title report twice. I highlighted dates. I circled the notary's name. I underlined the witness addresses. Then I opened my calendar and matched the deed date to my Chicago trip again, just to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't. Around midnight, I pulled up a photo of my own signature from a scanned tax document and compared it to the deed signature on the certified copy. Side by side, the differences were obvious in a way that made me nauseous. It wasn't just not mine. It was an imitation that assumed nobody would look closely. And that assumption that I'd never look closely was the most insulting part of all. By morning, my anger had cooled into something more useful. Resolve. I took the day off work and went back to Marissa's office. She didn't waste time. She had a draft demand letter on her desk already, with my name in bold at the top and the property address in a clean, centered block like it belonged in a textbook. This letter requests they agree to execute a corrective deed and return your title interest voluntarily, she said, sliding it to me. It also gives notice that we believe the recorded quitclaim deed is fraudulent, and that we will pursue civil action if they don't comply. I read it slowly, feeling each sentence settle like a weight. The letter was polite, clinical, and absolutely lethal. It didn't call Ryan a criminal. It didn't accuse Mom of anything. It didn't contain threats. It simply laid out facts and consequences, the way gravity lays out consequences. At the bottom was the deadline. 10 business days. 10 days? I asked. It's standard, Marissa said. It's also enough time for them to panic, which can be useful. Useful how? I asked, even though I already suspected. Marissa's eyes stayed on me. If they respond with admissions, excuses, or sloppy explanations, it helps. If they ignore it, it helps. If they try to transfer the house again after receiving notice, it helps even more. I swallowed. Can they transfer it? They can try, Marissa said. But we can also file a lis pendens once we initiate litigation. Notice to the world that the title is in dispute. That makes it difficult to sell or refinance. But you have to be ready to pull the trigger. I stared down at the letter again. 10 days sounded reasonable until I imagined what could happen in 10 days if Ryan was desperate. He could take out a home equity loan. He could try to sell. He could rack up liens. He could damage the property. He could do 1,000 things out of spite. Marissa, I said, what's to stop him from doing something stupid the second he sees this? Nothing, she said, which is why we prepare for the next step while we wait for their response. She opened another file and slid it forward. This is a draft complaint for a quiet title action, she said. If they don't comply, we file. We can also request temporary injunctive relief to prevent transfers, and I want to initiate contact with law enforcement as well, but we'll do it strategically. My stomach tightened. So you think we should report it now? I think we should be ready, she corrected. But I want your documentation organized first. Police respond better when they're handed a neat package instead of a story. That was exactly my language. Neat package, organized, verifiable. Marissa gave me a checklist that looked like something you'd use to build a case against a corporation, not your own family. Proof of non-presence, Chicago trip documentation, specimen signatures, multiple dated, copies of refinance/title documents, payment records, mortgage and repairs, communications, texts, voicemail logs, witness statements, anyone who can attest you didn't sign. The last bullet made me laugh, humorless. Witness statements, I said. From who? My family's going to say whatever Ryan tells them. Marissa's expression didn't change. Not your family. Your employer. Your coworkers. Anyone who saw you in Chicago. If you have a friend who was with you that day. We just need corroboration. I nodded and felt something shift again. This wasn't me, making a big deal. This was me, finally treating what happened like what it was, fraud. When I left Marissa's office, I didn't drive home right away. I parked at a coffee shop and started calling people I hadn't talked to in months. My manager, my coworker Jeff, who had been at the Chicago training, the HR admin who processed travel reimbursements, people who would rather be anywhere else than involved in someone's family disaster. But when I explained calmly, carefully that I needed confirmation of where I was on a certain date because my signature was being questioned, the tone changed. They got serious. Jeff said, "Dude, I remember that trip. You spilled coffee on your badge and got roasted for it." I almost laughed for real that time. My manager emailed me within an hour. Daniel attended training in Chicago during the week of ____ and was present in person. Simple, clean, professional. By the time I got home, I had a folder on my computer labeled Title Dispute, and inside it were PDFs and screenshots that made the deed's date look ridiculous. That evening, Marissa's office sent the demand letter via certified mail and email. I stared at the proof of sending receipt like it was a detonator. Because in a way it was. 2 days later, Elise called. Her voice was tight. "What did you do?" I sat on my couch, phone pressed to my ear, and forced myself not to snap. "I didn't do anything," I said. "I'm handling it." "Mom is crying," Elise said. "She says you're accusing her of forgery." "I'm not accusing Mom," I said. "I'm saying I didn't sign a deed that says I did." There was a pause, and then Elise said something that made my blood run cold. "Ryan says you did sign. He says you were drunk at a barbecue and you don't remember." I went very still. "Drunk," I repeated. "Yeah," Elise said quickly, like she was trying to soften it. "He says you'd had a lot to drink and you were emotional about Dad being sick and you kept saying you didn't want anything. And you signed." I stared at the wall, my jaw clenched so tightly it ached. Ryan wasn't just denying it. He was building a narrative to explain the evidence. And he was doing what he always did, taking something people already believed about me, that I was quiet, passive, conflict avoidant, and twisting it into a weakness. Daniel doesn't remember. Daniel was emotional. Daniel was drunk. It painted me as unreliable and him as the responsible brother cleaning up the mess. "Elise," I said, keeping my voice even, "do you believe that?" She hesitated, and that hesitation hurt more than her words. I don't know," she admitted. "I've never seen you like that." "Because it's not true," I said. "And I can prove I wasn't even in Colorado the day the deed claims I signed." She went quiet. I continued, voice steady. "Ryan is lying. Either he's lying because he forged it, or he's lying because he's covering for someone who did. But I'm done being the family's wallet and the family's scapegoat." Elise exhaled shakily. "So what happens now?" "Now," I said, "we let the professionals handle it. And if Mom is upset, that's because Ryan put her in this position." When we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, feeling a new kind of grief. Not grief for Dad, grief for the version of my sister who would have trusted me without needing a courtroom. On the 4th day after the letter went out, Ryan finally texted me. One sentence. "Stop this or you'll regret it." No denial. No explanation. No "let's talk." Just a threat. I forwarded the message to Marissa. She responded within minutes. Do not engage. Screenshot and preserve. That night, I got a notification from my credit monitoring app. A hard inquiry. Someone had tried to check my credit. My stomach flipped. I logged in, heart pounding, and saw the details. A lender inquiry related to home financing. Home financing. In my name. I called the lender's number on the report and spent 30 minutes navigating automated menus until I got a human being. Yes, the representative said. We received an application for a home equity product. Under my name? I asked, voice tight. Yes, she said. But it's incomplete. It hasn't moved forward. Who submitted it? I demanded. I can't disclose that, she said. I took a deep breath. Then flag it as fraud. Right now. And put a note on my profile that I did not apply. She asked me verification questions. I answered. She agreed to flag it. I hung up and immediately froze my credit with all 3 bureaus, my fingers shaking. Ryan hadn't just forged a deed. He was now probing for other ways to reach into my life. I barely slept again. The next morning, I told Marissa about the credit inquiry. Her face hardened in a way I hadn't seen yet. Okay, she said. We're not waiting 10 days. What do we do? I asked. We file, she said. Today. Quiet title complaint and an emergency motion to prevent transfer or encumbrance. And I want you to come with me to make a police report for suspected deed forgery. The fact that someone is attempting financial products in your name adds urgency. Hearing her say police report out loud made my mouth go dry. I'd pictured this going quietly. A letter, a correction, a family argument that eventually settled. But Ryan had made it clear he wouldn't back down politely. He'd escalate until I either gave up or got crushed. So I chose the third option. I showed up. Marissa and I went to the sheriff's office with a binder she'd organized that morning. It had tabs, summaries, copies, timelines, my Chicago proof, the deed, the affidavit, the insurance change, Ryan's threat text, the credit inquiry report. The deputy at the desk looked skeptical at first. I could see it in his eyes. Family drama, civil dispute, not our problem. Then Marissa calmly laid out the documents and said, This is not a family argument. This is a forged and recorded real estate instrument. Here is proof my client was out of state on the notarization date. Here is indication of improper notarization. Here is a subsequent attempt at financial fraud. The deputy's expression changed. He took it seriously after that. A detective came out and asked me to explain, in my own words, what happened. I told him the truth, but I told it like my job depended on it. Dates, facts, actions. No emotional speeches. No insults. He asked me one question that stuck in my throat. Do you know who would benefit from you being removed from title? He asked. I stared at the table between us. My brother, I said quietly. And my mother. Marissa's hand rested on the binder like a weight. The question, she added, is who initiated it. I left the station with a case number and a strange sense of calm. Not because I felt good. Because for the first time, the story wasn't just my word against Ryan's. It was my evidence against his paper trail. That afternoon, Marissa filed the lawsuit and the emergency motion. She also prepared a notice of lis pendens which would be recorded to publicly flag the title as disputed. When she told me it was done, my stomach flipped again because I knew what came next. They would be served. Ryan would have to look at a legal document that described his actions as fraud without any family-softened language. He would have to respond under oath. 2 evenings later, I was sitting at home when my phone lit up with a call from Mom. For a second, I almost didn't answer. I was so used to being shut out that the sound of her ringtone felt unreal. I answered anyway. Daniel, she said, and her voice was trembling, not with sadness but with fury. How could you do this to us? In the background, I heard Ryan's voice, loud and sharp, like he was directing her lines. You're suing your own mother, she continued, and the words sounded rehearsed. After everything we've been through. I closed my eyes and took one slow breath. I'm not doing anything to you, I said. I'm responding to what was done to me. You're calling us criminals, she cried. I'm saying I didn't sign that deed, I replied. And now the court and the police can decide what that means. Ryan's voice cut in the background. Tell him he's dead to us. Mom sniffed, then said it exactly as he wanted. You're dead to this family, she said. The words landed, and for a moment I felt nothing. Not shock, not sadness, just a clean, quiet emptiness. Then I heard Ryan take the phone from her. Listen, he said, his voice low and dangerous like he wanted it to feel private even though it wasn't. You think you're smart? You think your lawyer scares me? You don't know what you're messing with. I gripped the phone tighter. "If you didn't do anything wrong, then you'll be fine," I said. He laughed, short and ugly. "You were always the weak one," he said. "Always needed rules to feel brave." Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "You want the truth?" he said. "Come get it. Come to the house tomorrow, alone, and I'll show you exactly what you own." The line went dead. I sat there staring at the screen, my heart hammering. It sounded like a challenge, a trap, a desperate man trying to pull me back into a private fight where he controlled the story. And the worst part, for a split second I wanted to go. Not because it was smart, because it wasn't, but because some part of me still craved the old fantasy that this could be settled face to face, like a normal family conflict. Then I remembered the forged signature. I remembered the new locks. I remembered the credit inquiry. And I realized something simple and terrifying. Ryan didn't want to talk. He wanted to intimidate me into disappearing. I forwarded the voicemail log and call details to Marissa, then sat back listening to the silence in my apartment. Because tomorrow was going to bring something, another move, another lie, another escalation. And this time, I wasn't walking up to that door with a box of smoke detectors. I didn't go to the house the next day. Not alone, not for the truth, not for Ryan's little showdown on the porch. I called Marissa first thing in the morning and told her exactly what he said. She didn't sound surprised. "That's intimidation," she said, "and it's a mistake on his part. But you are not going there alone." "So what do I do?" I asked. "You let this stay in writing and in court," she said. "If you need to retrieve personal property, we request a civil standby through the sheriff's office. Otherwise, you don't meet him privately." I stared out my apartment window at the winter gray sky. "He's going to tell everyone I'm scared." "Let him," she said. "People who forge deeds count on pride. They want you to make emotional choices. Your pride is not worth your safety." By noon, Marissa had already filed the lis pendens. When she emailed me the recorded copy, I read the words slowly, feeling their weight. Notice of lis pendens, real property. It was a public flag planted right in the middle of Ryan's plan. No quiet refinancing. No clean sale. No more pretending the paper trail was unquestionable. That afternoon, the detective assigned to my report called me. "We're following up on the notary," he said, "and we're pulling the document submission details from the recorder. I can't promise a quick resolution, but the travel evidence you provided is strong." Strong. It was a simple word, but it mattered. Because for weeks I'd been treated like my memory and my character were the questionable parts. Now someone was saying the evidence spoke for itself. 2 days later, Ryan and my mom were served with the lawsuit paperwork. I know because Elise called me, crying. "They got served," she said, voice shaking. "Mom is losing it. Ryan is saying you're trying to ruin her life." I sat on the edge of my couch, phone pressed to my ear, and kept my voice steady. "Elise," I said, "I didn't start this. I'm ending it." There was a pause. "Ryan says your lawyer is lying," she whispered. "My lawyer didn't record a deed with my signature," I said. "And I didn't either." I heard Elise's breathing shift, like something was finally getting through. "Did you really not sign anything?" she asked. "No," I said, "and I can prove it. The date on that deed is the week I was in Chicago. I sent you the conference photo, remember? The one where Jeff made fun of my badge." Silence. Then Elise's voice cracked. "Ryan told me you were drunk. That was a story," I said. "A convenient one." She didn't defend him this time. She just sounded tired. "What happens to Mom?" That question always came back to Mom, like she was a shield people could hide behind. "What happens to Mom depends on what Mom knew," I said quietly, "and what she chooses to do now." For the first time, Elise didn't tell me to keep the peace. She just whispered, "Okay," like she was starting to understand that peace built on lies isn't peace at all. A week after they were served, Marissa got a response from Ryan's attorney. Not an apology, not a corrective deed, a denial. A flat statement that I had signed voluntarily, that I was retaliating due to grief, and that my financial contributions were gifts with no expectation of ownership. When Marissa read it aloud to me, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so bold it felt like he was testing whether reality still mattered. Marissa didn't laugh. She just nodded once and said, "Okay." Then we proceed. The next phase moved faster than I expected. Marissa filed an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction to prevent any transfer, refinancing, or encumbrance of the property while the case was pending. The court scheduled a hearing. And suddenly this wasn't just a family argument in a driveway. It was a judge in a courtroom looking at documents. The morning of the hearing I wore the only suit I owned. I sat beside Marissa, hands clasped, trying not to look at Ryan across the room. He showed up with his attorney and my mom. Ryan looked different than he did on that porch, still confident, but thinner around the eyes. Less like a man who held all the cards, more like a man trying to keep them from slipping. Mom sat rigid, clutching a tissue, not looking at me at all. When the judge began, Marissa spoke first. She laid out the timeline with the kind of calm that made it feel inevitable. She explained that I was removed from title via a recorded quitclaim deed I did not sign, that the document was notarized on a date I was out of state, and that there had been a recent credit inquiry related to home financing in my name. Then she submitted the evidence, travel records, employer letter, signature comparisons, the title report, and Ryan's text message, "Stop this or you'll regret it." The judge listened without expression, then turned to Ryan's attorney. "Counsel," the judge said, "what is your response to the allegation that the plaintiff was out of state at the time the deed was purportedly executed and notarized?" Ryan's attorney stood and began speaking in smooth, practiced sentences about memory, family gatherings, and the possibility that the deed date was administrative. Marissa didn't interrupt. She waited. Then, when it was her turn, she stood and said something that made the air in the room change. "Your Honor," she said, "if the date is wrong, then we have an additional issue. Why was a deed recorded with an incorrect execution date and notarization acknowledgement? And if the notary's acknowledgement is incorrect, then the validity of the recording is compromised." The judge's eyes narrowed slightly. Marissa continued, "Additionally, we have requested the notary's journal entry for this notarization. The notary has not provided it. We also have preliminary information from law enforcement indicating this notary has prior complaints for notarizing without the signer present." Ryan shifted in his seat for the first time. Not a dramatic reaction, just a small movement like a man trying to find a position where he didn't feel exposed. The judge looked down at the documents again. Then he spoke, slow and clear. "Given the evidence presented," he said, "the court finds there is a substantial likelihood of success on the merits, and that irreparable harm could occur if the property is transferred or encumbered during litigation." My pulse hammered in my ears. "I am granting the temporary restraining order and setting a preliminary injunction hearing date," the judge continued. "No transfers, no refinancing, no additional liens without court approval." He glanced at Ryan's side of the room, "And I strongly encourage the parties to resolve this before it escalates further." The gavel came down, and just like that, Ryan's plan shrank. Because his power had depended on speed and intimidation, the court took both away. Outside the courthouse, my mom finally spoke to me. Not warmly, not with love, but with a kind of shaky outrage. "You could have come to us," she said. I looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the old instinct to soften my words for her comfort. "I did," I said. "I came to the front door with smoke detectors, and you kept the chain on." Her face tightened. "I didn't know," she whispered. I held her gaze. "Mom, you told me Ryan said I signed something. That wasn't confusion. That was a story. Either you believed it because it was easier than facing the truth, or you believed it because you helped create it." Her eyes filled again. "Ryan said it was just paperwork." "Paperwork is ownership," I said. "Paperwork is responsibility. Paperwork is what you used to lock me out." Ryan's voice cut in from behind her. "You're enjoying this," he snapped. I turned and looked at him. I expected anger to flare. Instead, what I felt was clarity. "No," I said. "I'm surviving it." He stared at me like he wanted me to break, like he'd been waiting his whole life for that moment. I didn't give it to him. Over the next month, the case tightened like a net. The detective called again and said they had interviewed the notary. "She claims you were present," he said, "but she cannot produce a journal entry with your ID information. She says her journal was lost during a move." Lost. Marissa practically smiled when I told her. "Notary journals don't just vanish at convenient times," she said. "That's not a defense. It's an admission of incompetence at best." Then came the recorder submission details. The quitclaim deed had been dropped off in person, not mailed. The person who dropped it off wasn't listed by name, but the time aligned with Ryan's work schedule. He had taken a personal half-day at his job, according to a lease, around that same week. We also hired a forensic document examiner, handwriting expert, who compared the deed signature to multiple verified signatures of mine. His written opinion was cautious in legal language but clear in substance. The deed signature showed signs of simulation and was not consistent with my natural writing habits. In plain English, someone tried to copy me. When Marissa sent a settlement offer after that one last chance, Ryan's attorney suddenly wanted to talk, because once the evidence stacked up, denial stopped being strategy and started being liability. A mediation session was scheduled. In that room with a neutral mediator and 2 attorneys present, Ryan tried one last time to spin it. He claimed he thought I wanted out after Dad died. He claimed Mom pressured him to fix things. He claimed the notary handled it and assured him it was legitimate. I sat there and listened, feeling something almost surreal. He was doing what he always did, except now there were professionals in the room who didn't care about family hierarchy or who was louder. They cared about facts. Marissa leaned toward the mediator and said, "My client did not sign. We can prove he was in Chicago. We can prove the signature is simulated. We can prove the notarization is unsupported. If this proceeds, we will pursue attorney's fees and refer findings to the district attorney." The mediator's eyes went to Ryan like he was finally seeing him clearly. And Ryan, who had spent his whole life winning fights by dominating the room, started to sweat. By the end of mediation, Ryan agreed to sign a corrective deed restoring my ownership interest and acknowledging the quitclaim deed was invalid. The language was carefully drafted. It didn't require him to confess in a cinematic way, but it accomplished what mattered. It repaired the title record. The criminal side didn't just disappear, though. The detective had enough to forward the case to the DA's office. I was told it might take time, and that charges weren't guaranteed. But weeks later, I got a call that made my stomach drop again, this time with relief. They were pursuing it. Not because it was my brother and it was dramatic, but because forged deeds poisoned the whole system. The day the corrective deed was recorded, Marissa emailed me the stamped confirmation. I stared at it for a long time before it sank in. For months, I'd been treated like a selfish son trying to steal from his grieving mother. Now the public record, cold, neutral, undeniable, said otherwise. But the house wasn't the only thing I needed back. My reputation had been dragged through every family phone call and quiet neighborhood conversation. People had looked at me like I was some kind of predator circling my own mother. So I did something I never used to do. I told the truth out loud. Not on social media, not with a dramatic post. I simply sent a short message to the relatives who had been concerned, the ones who had called Elise, the ones who had whispered. "I want to clarify something," I wrote. "A recorded deed removing me from title was found to be invalid and has been corrected through legal action. I didn't sign it. Please don't contact me about it further." No insults, no paragraphs, no begging, just truth and a boundary. Some people apologized immediately. Some didn't respond at all. And that silence told me who they were. Elise visited a month later. She sat at my kitchen table, the same place where I'd built a spreadsheet to keep myself sane, and she looked at me like she was seeing me again. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I should have trusted you." I nodded. I didn't punish her with a speech. I just said the truth. I needed at least one person to believe me, I told her, and I didn't have that. Her eyes filled. "What are you going to do with the house?" That was the final piece, because owning something on paper doesn't automatically heal what happened inside it. I drove to the house one last time, with a sheriff's deputy present for a civil standby, to collect the few personal items I still had there. Old photos, some tools, Dad's watch that Mom had promised me. Walking through those rooms felt like walking through a memory that had been contaminated. The walls were the same, the floors were the same, but the meaning had changed. I stood in the living room and realized I didn't want to win by moving back in. I wanted to be free, so I made a decision that surprised even me. I didn't keep the house as a trophy. I moved to force a sale and end the financial entanglement completely. The mortgage would be paid off properly. Any remaining proceeds would be handled through the court process and documented agreements. And as for Mom, I didn't abandon her. But I also didn't allow her to keep using my guilt as a leash. I offered one thing, clearly and in writing: help finding a small apartment and a limited structured support plan, paid directly to housing for a set period so it couldn't be twisted, misunderstood, or used as leverage. No cash handoffs, no vague promises, no "I'll handle it." Clean lines, strong boundaries. Mom didn't take it well at first. She tried to cry. She tried to blame grief. She tried to tell me family doesn't do this. And I looked at her and finally said the sentence I should have said years ago. Family also doesn't forge signatures. That was the end of the argument. Not because it fixed her, because it ended the fantasy. I haven't spoken to Ryan since. There were no dramatic final words, no public showdown, no satisfying movie scene where he falls to his knees and admits everything. Real life isn't that neat, but there was something better than drama. There was documentation. There was accountability. There was the quiet moment when a system, imperfect, slow, frustrating, still worked well enough to say, "This is wrong and it will be corrected." And there was the moment I realized I could stop being the guy who absorbs damage to keep everyone else comfortable. If there's one lesson I took from all of it, it's this. Peace that requires you to stay silent while you're being harmed is not peace. It's permission. And once someone learns they can rewrite reality around you, call you ungrateful, call you cruel, call you the problem, they will keep doing it until you put something stronger than emotion in their path. In my case, it was a title search. A piece of paper that didn't care who cried the hardest. A record that didn't bend to family politics. And it proved what I'd known in my bones the moment that new lock refused my key. I wasn't losing my mind. Someone was stealing my life, one signature at a time.